I finally started watching Desperate Housewives. I've finished season 1 and I've started season 2. I was looking online and I couldn't see any commentary videos about this show at all, which should be a crime because not only was it super famous and had millions of viewers, but it really, I think, inspired a lot of television that followed. I'm going to be doing a deep recap of what happens in the show and my thoughts on it overall. And if you guys like it, we can go all the way through to the final season if you want, because I have so much to say. There's no way I could compile it all into one video. I think that would just be too long and it's more digestible like this. Season 1 built slowly. I was finding it a bit boring and I was like, oh, I hope it picks up. But then about halfway through season 1, the show got so juicy and interesting, and now I'm a few episodes into season 2. I'm just loving it, like genuinely. I'm getting an addiction to this show. Like, it's so bingeable and got really funny towards the end of season 1, and I just love it. I'm really impressed with how much I'm enjoying it so far, and the characters are interesting, and I have some thoughts on why it did so well as a show as well. One of the reasons I think is because of the themes that the show talked about and the way it addressed those themes. Like the title Desperate Housewives basically summarizes what the show is about, which is a bunch of women who are desperate for changes in their lives or seemingly have this perfect life with the white picket fence and the luxury, but behind the scenes they're really struggling with disappointment, secrets. Definitely the show plays a lot on how the aesthetics are really beautiful, but then underneath the surface everything's actually really messy. And the show isn't just about the lives of the women or the lives of the men in the show. It's the wives' interactions with their husbands and the kids have their own lives and insecurities going on that we see explored, and the other neighbors. One of my favorite things about Desperate Housewives is the way that it explores femininity and how every woman is so different. Like, you've got Gabrielle, who's kind of controlled by her husband Carlos, but also talks back to him. Women who really openly express their emotions like Susan, contrasted with ladies like Bree, who really struggle to express how they feel, which typically isn't a very feminine idea in society. But the show follows 4 main women, maybe 5 if you count Edie too. She's in the show's promo marketing stuff a lot, so I guess you could argue she's one of the main women. If you include all 5 of them, you've got Susan, who really struggles with her love life because she has this very messy divorce and she wants to be happy again. Her honesty and expressiveness is what makes her attractive to men. And then you've got Lynette, who's really striving for equality in her marriage, be a stay-at-home mum and a business mum and manage everything, but she ends up wearing herself really thin. But she can be quite manipulative sometimes in order to get what she wants. And then you've got Gabrielle, who also has the capacity to be manipulative, but often she uses her sexuality to get what she wants. Meanwhile, you've got Bree, who wants to be the perfect mum, homemaker, and have the perfect life, and under the surface she has a really complicated relationship with her husband and isn't always the best at parenting her children. And if you count Edie too, she's trying to fit into the neighborhood and be included by these girls, but she's not married, she doesn't have kids, and she's way more, I guess, sexually free than the other girls, and sometimes she feels judged for it. It is a really good show. Overall, I am enjoying it. I don't know if it will get worse or have shakier seasons, but I thought that season 1 was very strong, and it has a very clear mystery aspect from the beginning till the end. And it's so cool. I love that we learn more as we go along, and it's actually interesting and makes sense and is well explained, which is good as well. Being domestic is forced on a lot of the wives, even when it's not actually what they want. For example, Edie is single and childless, and yet she's isolated because of that and not really respected or fully included by the other women. At least with the point of the show I'm up to, it feels that way. And Gabrielle has always been so clear that she doesn't want kids, and I thought it was nice to have one of the main housewives just be childless, but then she's made pregnant by Carlos, and he does that in a very manipulative way by messing with her birth control so she'd get pregnant. However, what I like about the show is it clearly depicts that just because these women are going to have kids or get married, it doesn't guarantee happiness for them. A lot of the men are actually messier than the female characters. Like Carlos, Gabrielle's husband, is really controlling and patronizing towards her. Very sexist at points as well. And Lynette's husband has really good intentions, but at this point of the show at least, he doesn't really grasp what it's like from her perspective and how she feels like it's difficult to be a stay-at-home mum. And I'd say Mike is the only stand-up guy in the show that's more well-rounded, but even he is hiding a big secret from Susan. George the pharmacist is a total creep. Lynette's boys are really badly behaved. Susan's ex-husband blatantly cheated on her and doesn't even feel bad about it. That's a nice thing about the show, is that the men are equally or even more messy than the women, but the show doesn't go into man-hating territory, which would also be uncomfortable because the men are still entertaining characters. Often the women as well are complicit in the mistakes that happen in the relationship, or if a marriage breaks down, they play a big part in that, and the show makes it very clear that both parties are to blame, and it's not just one person that is the cause for faults in a relationship, which I really appreciate. So even if the show does have some flaws, overall in season 1, it's just really interesting and I've really enjoyed it so far. I'm really excited to see what happens in season 2. Before we get into what happens in the show, let's just talk about the main women and my thoughts on them so far. So we'll start off with Susan Meyer. I've heard a lot about Susan, and apparently she turns out to be one of the worst characters later on in Desperate Housewives, so I'm really scared to see that happen. I don't know when exactly it happens, like if she gets worse over time, because I thought she was absolutely fine in season 1. In fact, I've really liked her character on screen so far. Very emotional, absent-minded, and vulnerable, I'd say, the words I'd use to describe her character. She's also very accident prone and clumsy, which is often used as an opportunity for comedic relief. Like she hits her head at the bottom of the sink, or she trips over, or she locks herself out of her own house naked and then falls into the rose bush. She often puts herself into situations where she humiliates herself publicly in order to make a point or something. And she does that a lot, but I could totally see how over time that could become potentially annoying. She's like the archetype of the girl next door, and I'd say that she really is the heart of the show in season 1. However, now I've started season 2, there's definitely been a shift where Bree is moving into position as the main character in the show because Susan's a bit more on the back burner. Now I'm on season 2, I think I'm about 5 episodes in, and she made this error where she lied to Mike, her boyfriend, about where his son was and was kind of deceptive about it, and then didn't think that he would find out, which obviously he would find out, and it was quite frustrating. So I can already see it happening where maybe she's not going to think stuff through. Her struggles are relatable in season 1 of her trying to get over her ex and move on to be with Mike, and a lot of her storylines in season 1 revolve around her trying to get with Mike, hoping he'll like her, hoping he'll reciprocate the feelings, which is good, but I hope that they do give her more stuff to do, because it would be really annoying if the whole show revolved around her trying to get her relationship with Mike to work, because honestly, even though it was fun in season 1 to see her relationship with Mike begin, I'm really concerned that's all her entire character will be in season 2, because in season 2 she hasn't done much other than basically break up with Mike yet again and then get upset about it, and I'm worried it's going to turn into a cycle, but who knows, we'll have to wait and see. She definitely has an emphasis on relationships as part of her storylines, but I don't mind, because I know it's a stereotypically feminine thing in movies for it to be about their love life, but I don't think that's a reason to underplay it or say it's bad because she wants relationships to work out for her. Maybe people would say that her character should be more about her job or her achievements, but I think it's nice to see a woman who just wants to end up happily married with someone, and that's like a core part of her character, and I don't see anything wrong with that. But at the same time, there is a point where it will get tiresome if every 2 seconds she's just talking about Mike. I barely ever see her working or doing her job, you know? However, one thing I have started to notice in season 1 that could definitely potentially get worse is that she is made out to be very quirky and cute and clumsy, but that could be used as an excuse when she does stuff wrong. She does have this tendency to neglect her daughter, or when she gets depressed to just forget about her daughter, or she'll just share all her personal problems with Julie and ask her for advice. And it's just a very weird parent-child dynamic, because as the adult she should just be able to make her own decisions. So she really needs more female friends. There were a lot of points where she was asking Julie for advice when it would have been so much more appropriate for her to ask one of her older woman friends. Maybe it's just true in season 1 and that's it. But the writers love to find an opportunity to have her be naked or half dressed at any point. She was naked in the bushes and then Mike saw her, and then she was at this fashion runaway event and had her dress ripped off, so she was literally naked there in front of everyone. Or when she's trying to impress Mike, she goes and puts on this lingerie, and all the characters will be dressed up to go to an event, but then when they see Susan, they're all like, oh my god, Susan, you look amazing, and they all stop and stare at her. I don't even really know why, but it's like they're trying to prove to us that she's more attractive or desirable than Edie, because Edie's this blonde bombshell, but it's like they're saying what people really want is more the natural beauty of someone like Susan, the girl next door brunette type. To be fair though, I haven't seen the whole show, so this may change over time. I will say that I love Susan's chemistry with Mike, and I think they're so far the best couple in the series, because it's nice to see their relationship actually evolve from the beginning, so you get some backstory and context about how they met. And I swear all their kiss scenes are great. Maybe it's just overcompensation because she really wants this one to work out, but I felt like Mike was a lot more chill and go with the flow when it came to their relationship. And despite Susan's stupidness at points, I still felt like she was probably my favorite one out of all the girls in season 1. I'm just enjoying it while it lasts. But the next girl I want to talk about is Gabrielle. I'm really excited to see where her character goes. I think she has a lot of potential. She's introduced as the materialistic, self-centered one who is a caring friend but is also quite self-absorbed, and I feel like there's so much they could do with that. She loves her luxurious lifestyle, she loves getting compliments, she loves to feel adored and attractive, and sometimes if she feels like she's not getting enough attention, then she'll look for it elsewhere, which is one of the reasons why she cheats on her husband and has an affair. It's absolutely insane how her having a relationship with an underage boy is just pushed under the rug. It's so bad. He turns 18 at some point, I think towards the end of season 1, but when her relationship with him started, he was about 16 and she's a grown woman. It's like the Arya and Ezra thing from Pretty Little Liars, but worse because she's older than Ezra was. The guy playing John is about 26, so he looks much older than the character is meant to be. But it's insane that she wasn't charged for it. The parents of John had a very underplayed reaction, especially the dad. Her friends were still happy to keep being her friends, so she didn't suffer any real consequences. Her reputation overall is pretty unscarred, which is so stupid because I wanted to see her whole reputation be ruined by something like that, because that's just how it should happen in real life. And so the message is really icky. You can definitely see that it's an old show from like 20 years ago, because I can guarantee that shows nowadays would not be able to get away with doing that because the audience would be so mad. I will say though that I understood in a way why she cheated on her husband, because he's just so unlikable and controlling and creepy, and I just don't like him. If he thought maybe she was having an affair, he'd just go and beat people up without even checking to see if they were responsible or not. Gabrielle's definitely used as one of the main examples in the show of the pressure to be beautiful, feminine beauty standards, and consumerism. Gabrielle asserts her power through her sexuality and her beauty, but in a way it also represses her too. Even in the second season, Gabrielle's really fighting for her right to be involved with financial stuff in her marriage with Carlos, so he's not making the decisions all the time, because in season 1 he started to get really controlling around her bank accounts. Carlos basically assumes that his money is what keeps Gabrielle attracted to him and wanting him, which is partly true, and his identity is so closely tied to his wealth. And when they start having money troubles in season 1, it's not like Gabrielle just ditches him, but it definitely affects their relationship in a negative way, and it takes some work for them to say that they'd still be committed to each each other despite any money troubles. And Gabrielle genuinely cares about him, but Carlos starts having this big fear in season 1 that she's going to leave him and lose interest when he goes to jail and stuff because of these money troubles they're having. Her having an affair, cheating on her husband, puts him through emotional pain, and it takes her a while to actually feel guilty about it. For a long time she doesn't feel bad at all, so she's by no means perfect, which I also quite like. It's the same reason why in some ways I like Susan being selfish and stuff, because it makes them more interesting characters, and no one wants to watch a show about characters that are completely perfect. The next character I want to talk about is Bree. When I started season 1, I could not stand her. I did not like her at all. I did not enjoy her scenes. I thought she was annoying, and I was like, why is she one of the main characters? I wanted her to get off my screen. She's really rude to her husband in the first few episodes. She publicly humiliates him at a dinner party, and she can be really ruthless and cutthroat when she's upset about something. I didn't like the way she was speaking to her kids. There was more to her than that. Like, she genuinely wanted things to work with her husband, but he wasn't really fully emotionally present as a husband. And also her son starts being really disrespectful towards her and rebellious and downright mean at points, which made me feel really bad for her because she was trying her best in her own way. Now I'm on season 2. I'm actually thoroughly enjoying the scenes with her character. She's definitely worried about getting hurt or taken advantage of, but doesn't realize it, because it's like whenever she's feeling out of control, she just starts cleaning to try and put everything in order. And it's definitely a way for her to disconnect and forget about her feelings if she starts cleaning or distracting herself almost. When Rex starts having a heart attack, rather than immediately calling the police, she starts making the bed. She's actually a very good friend. Like, Gabby was having money troubles in season 1, and Bree was so sweet about it and was basically offering her money and being really caring about it. Lynette's the final woman I want to talk about, and so far she's definitely one of my favorites in the show in terms of characters. I just really like her. She's so cool. She's really driven and a go-getter. She's in touch with what people would consider her masculine side. If she wants something or she's bothered by something, she'll tell you to your face. She's not afraid of confrontation. So she contrasts her husband in a really cool way, because he's an extreme conflict avoider at points, whereas she likes to think that she's right, overly involved in situations and stuff where it actually has nothing to do with her, because if she thinks something's wrong or someone's being mean to someone, she feels the need to step in and be this white knight, and that gets her into some pretty sticky situations. And her husband tells her that she has this tendency to get all obsessive and overly involved. And again, all the wives have weaknesses, all of the women have problems. She had this continual assumption that her husband was going to cheat on her or not be loyal, which was honestly delusional. Tom is definitely more of a passive male, even with the way he communicates. It's a more traditionally feminine way of communicating, whereas she's very blunt and speaks the facts. When she thinks that maybe he might be cheating on her, she doesn't ask in a gentle way. She just kind of puts words in his mouth and assumes he's doing it. And Lynette starts to feel like she's really losing touch with herself in season 1, because she's been a stay-at-home mum for so long and she's got all these really crazy out of control kids to look after. She's definitely the super mum of the show. One of the reasons why she struggles so much as a mum too is because her kids are so crazy, they're hyperactive, they're loud, they can't sit still for 2 seconds, and they definitely have like ADHD. It's a very stereotypical view of people with ADHD, and it's just not accurate. Lynette hired this young, attractive babysitter to look after the boys. She was naked at some point because she threw her clothes in the wash or something, and she was just going to quietly go into the other room, but then she saw Tom there, and he didn't really look away immediately or apologize. He just sort of stared at her and smiled, and it was really creepy. And then he went upstairs and was obviously aroused by the experience, so he tried to initiate sex with his wife, which I thought was really odd. And then Lynette's reaction was weird because she sensed something was up, and she says she wants to hire a new nanny, but they should be preferably unattractive. And I don't know, that's so weird. Like, you shouldn't punish the women for your husband's bad behavior. But I did start to like Tom more throughout season 1, especially at the end of the show when he said they should maybe reverse roles and he should be a stay-at-home dad and she could go back to work, because he'll end up learning to be more empathetic towards her, and maybe putting himself in her shoes will make him respect more the hard work she does. Edie is the final character I want to talk about. She's like the single, fun, blonde character who brings a lot of comedic relief. she's also one of the only characters, if not the only character, who will consistently call Susan out on her bullshit every time, which is great because often people just don't really tell Susan off for stuff, and I always appreciated that Edie would say it like it is, and she would give Susan a really hard time and actually punish her when she messed up. She's obviously not a very good person, but the other housewives have issues too, so it's fine and it balances out. I don't really like how much Edie is shunned and ostracized for her mistakes when she doesn't really do anything wrong. But what makes Edie so likable to me is that she doesn't get on her moral high horse and pretend she's so amazing all the time. She knows what her issues are, she knows her faults, she's self-aware, and she doesn't claim to be this amazing person, which is really refreshing because often the women in the show do try to kind of excuse themselves and pretend they haven't done anything wrong when they have. I really hope that throughout the show, Edie will be allowed to continue with her very sex positive lifestyle and won't want to be tied down, because it would be a little bit sad if she ended up chasing the idea of having a husband. It's what makes her different. It's what makes her stand out to be independent. So I kind of hope they don't take her down the route of having her married again with kids, but we'll just have to see. But now I'm going to recap what happens in the show to each of the women. In the pilot episode, the residents are shaken up by the sudden suicide of their neighbor, Mary Alice Young, and they're really confused as to why she would kill herself because her life seemed to be perfect. We end up, as the series goes on, learning more and more about her very suspicious husband and her disturbed son, Zach, and this whole thing around her wanting to have a kid, and so Zach isn't actually her child, and in fact Zach is the son of Mike, Susan's boyfriend, who Mike never raised, he never knew. We meet Susan and Edie, who are both fighting over the new hot neighbor, Mike. Edie wants to sleep with any hot guy in town, so she doesn't like that Susan's trying to move in on her man, and so she's quite frustratingly trying to get in the way every time Susan tries to talk to Mike. So immediately Edie and Susan are established as not even frenemies, just enemies. Susan accidentally burns Edie's house down because she sneaks over to try and see if Edie is hanging out with Mike there, and then she knocks a candle over without realizing, and she feels too guilty to tell Edie about it, nor does she like Edie, so she doesn't think that Edie would be particularly forgiving about it. While the ladies put away Mary Alice's belongings, they find this blackmail note there. We later learn that a very nosy, nasty neighbor was the one blackmailing Mary Alice, because she found out that Mary Alice's son isn't actually her son, and that she'd killed the mother who was trying to come into the house and take her son back. In the second episode, Bree suggests to Rex that maybe they should do marriage counseling, because Bree's trying really hard to uphold her image as the perfect wife, but because she's so controlling and micromanaging everything Rex does, he feels really unhappy in their marriage and he wants a divorce. And there are multiple episodes of them going back and forth as to whether they should divorce or not, and antagonizing each other. In the fourth episode, Carlos becomes suspicious that his wife Gabrielle is cheating on him, but he ends up suspecting the wrong man rather than the gardener, and because Gabrielle doesn't feel particularly guilty about it, she's continuing to cheat on her husband without his knowledge, but she starts noticing that the gardener John is actually forming feelings for her, and it's not just like hooking up. In the eighth episode, the dead woman's husband Paul mercilessly kills the nosy neighbor Martha Huber because he realizes that Martha was actually involved in the cause of his wife's suicide, and he's so angry about it he decides to kill her. In the next episode, Bree and Rex are trying to figure out how to parent their son Andrew, because he just has no remorse for multiple bad things that he's done, and they find marijuana in his room. Paul, the disturbed neighbor whose wife's died, has his son sent away to a mental institution, but then he finds out that his son has disappeared, and Zach's actually now staying in Julie's room. Julie's the daughter of Susan, and Zach feels like he can trust Julie to look after him and not say anything since they're both kids, and so without her mum's knowledge, Julie has him hidden there, and they start to form this bond and even this young kind of romance. And Paul's really mad because he doesn't know where his son is and he's out looking for him, but Zach doesn't feel comfortable going back to his dad's house. Zach at this point is a character you do sympathize with and root for. However, Susan, the mum, ends up finding out, and she obviously can't have this boy staying in her house. Susan's never been responsible in her life. She's always letting Julie do her own thing, and she never plays the parent card. But then when she feels like it, she decides to be responsible and send Zach back to his father. And it really annoys Julie because she feels like Zach's father, Paul, isn't actually safe to be around. Clearly he isn't, because we saw him murdering a woman ourselves. Bree at this point has been a very unlikable character because of her controlling attitude and just in general what a weird woman she is. But we end up feeling pretty bad for her because Rex, her husband, cheats on her because he couldn't be bothered to communicate his issues in the bedroom with her. And also it's partly due to the fact that she is so judgy and conservative that he feels like if he shared something, she would jump down his throat and be really mean about it, which she kind of was. So he'd been cheating on her, and it's really embarrassing because the woman that he cheated on her with has been doing this with basically a lot of men in the area, and they'll pay her to do it, and it's like her part-time job. Bree is really worried that everyone will find out that Rex was one of her clients, and Bree's public image is really important to her. Meanwhile, Gabrielle, who's always been pretty materialistic, starts to get really stressed because she's actually having money troubles, and she thinks that she might actually need to get a job again for the first time in ages. And this makes Carlos really insecure because he feels like maybe she won't want him anymore, because a big part of his appeal as a husband was the fact that he could provide for her financially. Eventually, when she feels really pressurized, Susan ends up confessing to Edie that she actually burned her house down. And this is a pretty awkward confession to make because she just started bonding with Edie. Martha Huber's body was found, and as a result, Edie was really upset because she doesn't have many female friends in the area, but she was close to Martha. And Susan tries to comfort her, but as a result, Edie thinks that maybe Susan's intentions are pure and they could actually have a friendship. And she starts to actually bond with Susan despite their female rivalry and bitchiness competing over Mike. But then Susan kind of ruins it by saying, hey, I burnt your house down. They go back and forth a lot throughout the show, especially when it involves competing over guys. That's when they often get really shaky. Rex and Bree's marriage is going really badly and they're always fighting. So after a while, they just take a break and Bree starts casually dating this pharmacist called George, who's actually really predatory. George keeps trying to make a move on her or kiss her, but Bree's a bit hesitant because I think subconsciously she's really uncomfortable around him. George is super into her, and so he actually makes a plan that he's somehow going to have her leave her husband or have her husband die or something so he can be with her. The entire time it's basically just Lynette struggling with her kids not being invited to birthday parties because they're so badly behaved, her kids not being let into daycare because they're so disruptive, and she can't catch a break as well because no other mum wants to look after her kids or babysit them for her, and even getting a babysitter who can handle them is difficult. And then the one good babysitter she gets, she ends up firing because she thought the babysitter was too attractive for her husband, and the whole thing's a mess. Mike is the mysterious hot guy who's arrived in the neighborhood, and we don't know much about him except that Susan has a huge crush on him. But we know he has a secret and is being hired to investigate stuff, but we don't really know why. He ends up meeting with his employer, Noah Taylor, who wants him to find Deirdre, who's been missing for more than 10 years. And we don't know at this point that Mike and Deirdre had this association. We don't know that. We just think that she's this random woman that Mike's looking for. Meanwhile, the gardener John's parents end up finding out about his relationship with Gabrielle, and they're obviously really mad because she's this much older woman and it's illegal. The mum's really angry and the dad is just really weirdly forgiving and chill about the whole thing. Mike and Susan start developing this genuinely adorable relationship, and they have such great chemistry. Like I said, they just have such cute, very realistic interactions, and she knows he's doing some dodgy stuff, but she doesn't know why, and it makes her really suspicious. And then she ends up finding out about his criminal record and she gets really angry, and it's kind of stupid because he gives her a letter trying to explain why he did what he did, and she doesn't want to read it, and she just keeps yelling at him rather than letting him explain himself. It's really dumb because she allowed herself to treat him badly and spiral, but it all could have been so much more solvable if she just heard him out and let him explain. And I really don't like how she was just jumping to conclusions about who he was rather than just asking him. Although Zach's gone back to his dad, he and Julie are still having this friendship/relationship. And as a mum, Susan is really bothered to see her young 14-year-old daughter hanging out with this weird kid. But luckily, even though Julie's secretly seeing him, she ends up being mature enough to make the decision to create some distance for herself, because they're at a pool party and he's making some sadistic, just weird comments about some boys, and it's just unnecessarily reactive and it makes Julie a bit uncomfortable. So she decides to call it quits on their little relationship. But Zach ends up taking taking it really badly and becoming extremely obsessive with her. And Susan as a mum notices this, and obviously she is protective of her daughter, and she finds Zach just very disturbed, and at multiple points she has to say to him to stay away from her daughter. We know that he's had a hard time. His dad's not very nice and his dad treats him really badly, but Zach is quite unsafe to be around Julie, and that does make him more unlikable, and he gets really angry and has some big outbursts. Bree ends up struggling a lot in terms of her relationship with her son Andrew because he admits that he thinks he might be gay. The dad takes it better, but Bree handles it really badly, and she thinks it's sinful and he won't go to heaven and it's weird. And this makes Andrew really angry because she keeps trying to intervene to convince him that he's not gay, and so he ends up sharing that he has some very sadistic ideas to emotionally manipulate and destroy his mother's life. Meanwhile, Lynette starts getting really jealous because an ex-girlfriend of Tom's starts working with him and has been for a while, but Tom didn't tell her because he knew that she'd be angry and flip out. And the reason why Lynette's so bothered is because it's not just an ex-girlfriend, but it's actually the girl that Tom was with when he cheated on her to be with Lynette for the first time. Tom was with someone else when he met Lynette, which explains why now she's so paranoid about him repeating the pattern and cheating. And he ends up sharing that he feels like she's pushing him further away with her insecurities and stupid, petty high school behavior. Like, she invites the woman around for dinner with just the three of them to try and prove a point that she and Tom are so happy together. And it makes it worse too by the fact that the woman does seem to be trying to take Tom back. George the pharmacist still has this obsession with Bree and he wants to get with her. She and Rex were going to give things a go again, and she just wanted to be friends with George, but George is really pissed off about this, so he starts tampering with the heart medication of Rex. Rex is starting to get sick and he doesn't know why. We also have this new character introduced called Felicia, but she comes into the neighborhood because it's her sister Martha Huber that's murdered. She's such a funny character. The facial expressions this woman does are so funny. I don't know what it is about her. She just cracks me up. Like, she's so awkward every time she comes on screen and so obviously dodgy. When Rex and Bree are in the middle of a fight, Rex has a heart attack and he actually ends up dying, and it's really sad because he dies thinking Bree was poisoning him because he learns that his medication was being tampered with or something. He writes a letter saying that he forgives her despite what she's done before he dies. In the final episode, we get a series of flashbacks revealing what happened to Mary Alice and why she chose to kill herself, which wraps it up really well. Tom finds out through his boss that Lynette tried to get him fired and also not get a promotion because she thought he'd be traveling too much, and it really pisses Tom off because obviously he wants to work, he'd always wanted to get a promotion, and so he ends up saying that he quits and that he wants to reverse the roles. He wants to be a stay-at-home dad. He wants a break from the whole thing, which I think will be so interesting for season 2. Mike kidnaps Paul and brings him to this desert area and tries to interrogate him about what happened to Deirdre, but Mike doesn't end up actually killing Paul and he lets him go. We also have this new family move-in called the Applewhites, which is interesting because they're an all-black family, and I do wonder if the show realized they weren't particularly inclusive right from the get-go, so they quickly rushed to bring in some characters so they could tick the diversity box and be like, look, we did something. But I don't want to assume anything yet. I want to gather some more information, but I'm extremely concerned, to say the very least. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, guys, and make sure you stay tuned for the next videos in this series, and I will see you for the next one.